we're going to continue with what I call science and the Bible. Can you just tilt that mirror? It is turned totally wrong. Just pull the bottom out a little bit. Quite a bit, quite a bit. That's good, thank you. So part of this group of sermons, this is part number 6 actually, and it is basically in contrast to the atheistic view that there is no God. And the reason they want that is because if there is no God, there is no accountability, there is no judgment, there is no hell, there is no punishment. And that suits them fine, because then they can do whatever they want to do as long as they're alive on this earth, and hey, whatever comes afterwards, they don't care. They aren't worried about it. At least I don't think they're worried about it. But their hope is that science will somehow prove that there is no God. And as I study, my research takes me in some strange directions. And this sermon got rewritten, and my wife, bless her heart, got really upset with me last night. Because I thought I was done at about 7 o'clock yesterday. I thought I was going to wrap it up and be done with it. But instead, my research took me off in a totally different direction, and the whole sermon got rewritten pretty much from scratch. Yeah, so it's nothing like what I started off with. But the fact is that our scientific equipment is getting so good that we are discovering more and more and more every day, and science bases its beliefs, and I'm going to put it that way, upon evidence. Now we do too, don't we? What is our faith built on? Well, it's based on the evidence that we find in the Word of God. Not proof, evidence. We believe what is reported. And that's where our faith comes from. But science is now beginning to see evidence of this thing called intelligent design. They don't like it. I was reading so many funny arguments yesterday against intelligent design. They're dead set against it because intelligent design means somebody designed it. And then, who might that be? Might that be God? Oh yes. That's not what they're wanting. They're wanting to disprove the existence of God, and instead, their investigations are showing more and more and more every day that God is real. Now, for the first few weeks, we kind of planted a foundation for us to build everything else upon. And it's based upon 2 small little facts that are difficult for science to explain. Number 1, the existence of the atom. It should not exist. As I've told you before, the little nucleus is consisted of positively charged protons, which should repel each other, not cluster together so tightly. They should fly apart. Okay, that's problem number 1. And they can't explain it, but guess what? They keep making up things that they think are holding it together. The latest one, I'll tell you, it's really grasping at straws. They call them gluons. Yeah, something is gluing it together. So they're calling these little particles that have never been seen and are purely theory gluons. If you can't find something, make it up. I'm really getting disappointed with science because it's not sticking with the facts anymore. It's just making stuff up to fill in these gaps that they cannot explain. We have to have an explanation that doesn't involve God. Now, they're dogmatic about that, and I want you to keep that in mind. They will do almost anything to not admit that there might be a God. So we looked at the atom, because it's the building block of everything you see. And then we looked at the building block of all living things, the cell. And inside of that cell, we delved deep and we found this amazing stuff called DNA. Yeah, DNA. How many of you remember how many base pairs are in a strand of DNA? How many of you remember that number? 3 billion. 3 billion base pairs. In other words, all that DNA in the nucleus, since there's 26 chromosomes in there and they all have DNA, we're talking around about 10,000 books of about 200-page size. Typical paperback book, of a good adventure story. 10,000 books to hold all that information in just one cell. Now that's a lot of information. And right now scientists are trying to figure out, if there's information there, is there like memory? Is this where a bird gets its instincts? How on earth does a baby lamb get up and in a couple of hours is walking around and jumping around and dancing around? And how is that even possible? Who taught it to do that? Maybe it's in the instruction manual built inside of it. Which brings up another question. Why are humans, who are supposed to be so sophisticated, so smart, why does it take us about a year to get up on our feet and start walking around? I mean, we barely crawl within the first 6 months, if that. What is it about this DNA that in some animals, it's brilliant what it does? How is it that a fly can pop out of its pupated cocoon and fly? As soon as its wings dry, man, it can take off, it can buzz around, it doesn't go and bump into all the walls learning how to fly. It just can do it. And it knows what to look for to feed on. So already, it's self-sustaining. It's in the DNA. And we found out that that DNA is really special because that DNA has to divide constantly. Constantly. It's splitting and creating two new identical cells over and over and over again. In your body, it does it about 2 million times a day. Ooh, really? And it does it so carefully and so accurately that scientists are now looking at the DNA and trying to figure out how on earth does it do it. And remember a couple of weeks ago we showed you a little movie of that little walking guy? Well, this is their new theory. There are these little walking stick figures in there, and they walk up and down the strands of DNA, making sure it sticks together like it's supposed to stick. I find that really hard to believe. But that's their explanation. Well, DNA is so important because it is extremely stable. It does not like change, and it has a self-correcting mechanism built right into it. So when there is a little error, it switches it around and makes it the right way, like it should be. So it resists mutation. But evolution needs mutation, and it needs it big time. Because it's the first and the primary reason that Darwin thought that things change. The environment forces pressure upon the genes and they have to change and they mutate into something a little bit different. And then they mutate again into something a little bit different so that the species keeps getting better and better and eventually turns into a totally different species. Mutation. Well, we talked about mutation, didn't we? And mutations are rarely beneficial. Most mutations are detrimental. In other words, they create a weakness rather than a strength. Yeah, they're not always, in fact, they're seldom good things. Invisibility, wow, what a great idea for camouflage. But that frog is invisible except for a skeleton. And I can guarantee it didn't survive very long because when your eyes are invisible, you can't see either. Your eyes rely upon pigments inside to capture the light and be able to see. But if your eyes are totally transparent, you don't see at all. How many of you have ever known an albino? I've known a couple in my lifetime. 2 African albinos who were just whiter than I am. Kind of reddish hair and pink eyes. And you know something? They're almost as blind as a bat. Their eyesight is horrible. In fact, they can hardly stand bright light at all because it doesn't just come through the pupil, it comes right through the eye itself because the eye is not pigmented properly. That's why they're kind of white like that. The pigment is not there. So mutations are not normally a good thing. And secondly, nature itself, well, in the animal kingdom, when an offspring is born with something strange, the parent usually kills it immediately. Yeah, mutated animals don't usually live a very long life. doomed to a very short one. For one reason or another, they just will not survive. So nature itself is actually extremely resistant to change. Now understand that. It is not friendly to change. It hates change and it resists it. Everything about it, all the mechanisms, the animals themselves, are against change. They do not like it. So Darwin's theory goes right off the rails right there for a start. But we'll carry on. We'll kind of try and bend a little bit and be kind if we can. Now remember this. What is science? What's the word mean? It means knowledge. And I know this. I know that. I know this. That's what science means. It means I know this. Not I think this is it. I'm pretty sure this is it. But it's supposed to mean knowledge. Again, that gets me every time because in this day and age, no. Science is not about knowledge. Science is supposed to stick to a set of rules and regulations. And they go something like this. You observe a phenomenon. Oh, that's interesting. I wonder why it does that. Then we experiment and we try and replicate the phenomenon to see if we can do it again. Like it just doesn't this one-time accident. Look at that, I can do that again. I can do that again. When we duplicate the process, we formulate something called a hypothesis. In other words, a hypothesis is an idea. I think I know what's going on here. Then we take the hypothesis and we test it. How? Repeat the experiment. Did it happen again? Yes. Repeat the experiment. Did it happen again? Yes. 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 Okay. If the hypothesis can be proven over and over again, then we step it up a little bit. We now call it a theory. Now a theory means I'm almost positive this is what's going on. I'm pretty sure this is what's going on. And there's a lot of theories going on out here. And like I said, yesterday as I was reading and studying, and my goodness, I couldn't believe how many contradicting theories I came up with. Scientists don't agree with each other on hardly anything. I was shocked. I thought most of this stuff is pretty much settled, but oh no. Even on the theory of evolution, turns out there's 6 different theories about evolution. And most of them aren't like Darwin's theory, they're somewhat different. They don't rely on mutation, they rely on something else called inherited traits. Maybe it's just the terminology. But it's a different theory. And they don't agree with Darwin. So, we are now in a situation that's kind of strange. We formulate a theory, then we compare that theory with other theories to see which one best explains the phenomenon. You follow me? Eventually, we're going to put them all together and we're going to say, okay, that one, that one, that one, each one has its own best points, but that one explains it the best. Ah, really? That then becomes known as the predominant theory. But it's not law. Now, understand that. It's not, chiseled in stone. We do have a lot of laws, don't we? The law of gravity, yeah, we sure do that. I can drop a pin over and over again and it'll always fall. But, interestingly enough, scientists still to this day don't know what gravity is or where it comes from. They still are having a hard time explaining it. It's a phenomenon, and they know it's there, and they know if they drop it, it's going to fall, so they've made it a law. But they can't tell you why it does it. Oh, it's gravity. Yes. But what is gravity? We don't know. We don't know. Where's it come from? No idea. I have seen some ridiculous theories about what gravity is and where it comes from. Silly ones. But compare it with others, and here's what I want you to understand, and see which one best explains the phenomenon. In other words, whichever theory sounds the best, makes good sense, that's the one we ought to stick with. But that's not science. this day and age. So this theory of evolution tries to tell you that something big actually started from something small. And it changed, 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 and became something new. And they would tell you the fossil record backs this up. How many of you heard of that? The fossil record backs this up. Interesting. That's where I went yesterday. I went looking for the fossil record. You know what I found? This is a beautiful little chart. Look at all these different animals that eventually turned into a whale. Hello? Not true. They have created in their own minds animals that must have been something like this. They've drawn beautiful pictures of them, but no such fossil has ever been found. All those X's? As far as we know, they never existed. But science needs those to fill in the gap between that big rat kind of animal that lived in the swamp, which loved the water so much that eventually it turned into a creature that didn't ever leave the water, and then that eventually became a whale. That's what evolution says. I spit on it. That's just plain silly. Where's the transitory evidence? Where is the change from A to B, to B to C, to C to D? Show me one. Do you know what? To date, science has not been able to come up with even one transitory fossil. Now, they thought they've had a few. We're going to talk about a couple of them today because it's kind of shocking what actually they are and how much the theory of evolution relies upon these to be true when in reality, maybe they're not. So understand that. There are almost no fossils that we could consider transitory. They're not a missing link. I should say they're not a found link in the missing chain. So scientists have created this theory called missing links. Sounds nice. Well, there are some missing links. And, you know, okay, we've got a missing link there in that chain, and we're not sure. We've never found anything to verify that. And this is what they would have you believe, right there, is that there's this long chain of evidence, but we got this one little missing link right there. If we could just find that one, the chain would be complete. That's what they want you to believe, and the way they tout this, you'd think that's the way it is. But no, it's more like this. It's more like this. Yeah, there's a whole lot of missing links. In fact, so many, I can't even find the chain. It's not a chain, it's a link there. Well, we think that one might have become such and such an animal. Oh, here's another link over here. We think that one eventually became a dinosaur. And here's another link over here. A link. A link joins things together. It's not just standing by itself. What can you do with a link of a chain? Really? Can anybody think of a useful thing that we could do with a single link of a chain? Dean? I can't think of a thing. It's useless by itself. And the theory of evolution has a whole bunch of missing links. So, they have tried to create links that fill in the gap. All right. Neanderthal man. How many of you have heard of Neanderthal man? I think everybody's heard of it. You may not have known about it, never seen it. Okay, now, a skull, I should say parts of a skull were found, and they were pieced together, and the dark spots are basically putty to fill in the gaps that they didn't have. And they put together a skull, and they named it Neanderthal man. It has these heavy protruding brows, and it has this really stout, square jawline, and, you know, that's Neanderthal man. He was predecessor to Homo erectus, who was the first real upstanding human being just before Homo sapiens. Yeah, so Neanderthal is supposedly a couple of generations down the line from us. And Neanderthal man is supposed to be extinct now because he's been replaced. Really? That's funny. I saw an actor on TV the other day. And you know what? This is what they say Neanderthal man looked like. Then you go back and let you compare them? Huh? Hello? How much difference do you see there? That low sloping forehead, the jutting eyebrows, the heavy square jaw. Huh? Could he pass for a Neanderthal? Yeah. How about this famous guy? Huh? Oh, everybody knows Ron Perlman, right? We've seen him in a lot of movies where he usually puts on makeup and looks like some sort of a different kind of creature. He actually starred in a movie, Beauty and the Beast, years ago. He was the Beast. He's often appeared as something other than a normal human being. And he does have heavy eyebrows and a big, strong jawline, just like Neanderthal. So we could go to a cemetery, and if we dug up about 50 graves, we probably could find 5 or 6 skulls that we would swear on a stack of Bibles were Neanderthal skulls. They fit the description. They match the shape and the size and the configuration perfectly. But that doesn't make him Neanderthal, does it? Just makes him a guy who maybe was kind of homely while he was alive. Go to Australia. Australia is full of living Neanderthals. Yeah, the Aborigine people, they fit to a T, almost all of them, Neanderthal characteristics. But they're all alive and living well. No. We cannot lay any kind of credence to this idea that humans have gone through this stage just because we found a skull that has a shape on it that looks like Ron Perlman. No, I'm afraid not. I'm not going to do that. But the real shame of all of this is that scientists, or maybe not really scientists, but scientific fanatics, have gone to great lengths to try and prove evolution by filling in some of the missing links. Now, this is a skull that's supposed to be Piltdown Man. It was found in a place in Sussex, England. And supposedly it was a predecessor to the Neanderthal man. Okay? Piltdown Man. And it has interesting features because some of the features are very much like an ape, and some of the features are very much like a human. So they say this human being walked the earth 500,000 years ago. 500,000 years ago, this guy was walking the earth, and he kind of hunched over because he, just basically was still kind of an ape, so. Oh, really? Well, guess what? 1949, they found out it was an absolute fake. Yep, microscopic examination showed tool marks on the teeth. The teeth had been filed down and ground down so that they looked more human. The jawline, it actually had a broken piece here, so you couldn't really make it fit the skull anyway, which was good because it wouldn't have fit. The skull part on the top was human, but the bottom part was orangutan. Somebody had put together a forgery, a fake, a fraud, by using different parts of an animal, put them together to create a missing link, so that there would no longer be a missing link in that spot, but a transitory fossil. It was a lie. Now, the most famous fossil I've ever seen, I've seen a replica of it in a museum in Zimbabwe. It was very interesting. It's a skeleton of what looks like a kind of a bird, but the head and the teeth, no, and the legs and the hands, and no, and the long tail, that's more like a lizard. Yeah, it's more like a lizard, but there's a pattern in there, and if you look carefully, you see a pattern. Yeah, I can kind of see where it looks like there were feathers. You see that? Mm-hmm. Well, 1985. How many of you can remember 1985? It's not that long ago. Oh, in 1985, 6 scientists objected to the validity of the fossil called Archaeopteryx. Don't try and spell it. You'll strain your brain trying to spell that stupid word. But they objected and said this was a forgery. You can see how it was tooled into the stone to make it look like it had feathers. It was just a lizard, that somebody altered it to make it look like a bird, because that was one of the missing links that we needed to find. that jump between reptiles and birds. There has to be something in between, a transitory fossil. And Archaeopteryx, it looked like it was a missing link. And it's been in museums around the world, well, replicas of it. The original is kept under lock and key in the British Museum. Nobody's even allowed to see it because they call it priceless. They don't know how much it's worth, and they're afraid somebody might try and steal it and then sell it to a collector for millions or billions of dollars. So they only ever show a replica. And in the other museums that have them, it's a casting, usually made out of fiberglass. A replica, not the real thing. But when they examined the real thing, they objected. Said, you know what, this shows evidence of having been tampered with. Wow, if this one goes down the drain, pretty much the whole theory of evolution goes down the drain. Okay, so what do we do with all of this stuff? I mean, there are a lot of fossils around. I mean, the museum up in Chicago, there's a huge skeleton up there, Tyrannosaurus Rex. I think they've got a Triceratopsia, and I think they've got a Brontosaurus as well now. So I think there's 3 dinosaur skeletons in that museum, but understand this. They're not skeletons. If you could ever get close enough to one to kind of thump it with your finger, you'll say, hey, what is this? It's a kind of plastic resin. Why? Well, they don't let the original out. Oh no. The originals are kept under lock and key, but this is a replica of what we have found. And of course, quite often they add some extra bones like the ribs, to kind of fill it in and make it look like it supposedly looked. But what they don't do is they don't color the ones that they do have a different color from the ones they don't have and just guessed at. Otherwise, you find maybe almost half that skeleton is actually missing. They don't have it all. Complete skeletons are extremely rare. And usually when they're rather small animals. So what do we do with this? Dinosaurs were supposed to have roamed the earth millions of years ago and then become extinct, long before human beings ever appeared. Really? You don't say. Well, we've got a problem here. You can't date dinosaur bones. Do you know why? Because they aren't bones at all anymore. What they dig out of the ground is stone. Because the bones disappeared long ago and left gaps, and the gaps were filled up with sediments that turned into stone. That's why we call them fossils. They didn't find the bones of a dinosaur. They found the fossils, which looked like bones, and they put them all together, and hey, guess what we got? We got a dinosaur here. But because they're not made out of actual living or formerly living tissue, there's no DNA in it, and because it's not previously living tissue, it cannot be carbon dated. No. There's no way to date this stuff. So why do they say it was 3 million years ago? Where did they get that date from? Okay, well, science has done something very interesting. Science has got other scientists to agree with this science. You ever heard of something called a circular argument? You ever heard of a circular argument? I think. Therefore, I am. I think. That's a circular argument. How do you prove it? Well, can't. But it's an argument that just kind of keeps going around and around and around. And science has now used other science to try and prove their own science. But here's the interesting thing. This science, called geology, tries to date things according to how deep they were found down underground. And they find these supposed layers in the ground that they call strata, and they find different kinds of fossils, sometimes in different strata. Totally different fossils. Yeah, quite often there's this type, and then there's that type, and there's that type, and that type. Okay. Well, if you look at the fossil record, something very interesting does show up, is that almost all of the fossils down at the very bottom are aquatic. What's that mean? Oh, it means when that sediment was formed, it was underwater. It was part of the ocean floor. Okay. Well, you're not going to find a dinosaur swimming around at the bottom of the ocean, now are you? Even if he was in existence at the time, he's not going to be in that sediment. No, he would have been drowned. So duh, he stays out of the water. So it makes sense that we're going to find life of an aquatic nature at the very bottom of the strata. And that's what this record shows. And as we get higher and higher up, eventually we get to the point where, now we've got land animals. Here are some land animals. See how long it took before they even appeared? No. That just means that the water finally dried up in that particular place. That's all. The dinosaurs could have been there at the same time. But they just didn't end up in the same strata because of the conditions. See the foolishness of this argument? It assumes something. It assumes that the geological conditions in that area were always the same. And they're not. The earth is constantly changing. Lakes dry up and disappear and are gone and never come back. Oh yeah. We got several examples of that. So you can't say that that is true. And you can't say that that bottom layer is 50 million years old and the middle layer is 25 million years old and that. Well, how do they try and say it? Well, they say by the fossils that are in it. Those fossils existed 50 million years ago. How do you know that? Well, evolution says that those had to have come into existence at least that far back because they're all extinct now. So, really? So evolution, a theory, is your proof that that's how old that strata is. And then, of course, what's evolution do? Evolution uses geology. So you see how deep that is down there? Well, that had to have happened 50 million years ago. If you don't believe me, ask a geologist. Are you seeing where I'm going here? The one science is used to try and back up the other science, but guess what? Both of them are just theoretical, not factual. Nobody was around 50 million years ago to make a record of it. And here's the problem with science. In order for that theory to become true, what do they have to do? They have to be able to repeat it. Hello? Isn't that the truth? For it to become a law, you have to be able to repeat it. Over and over and over. Just like I showed you with dropping the pen. I can prove it's a law, because every time I drop that pen, it falls down. Never falls up, it always falls down. I can repeat that. Evolution, they can't repeat any of it. None. They can take the chemicals that are in DNA and they can mix them all together. Guess what? Does it make a strand of DNA? It doesn't. It makes a mess. Yeah, it's a slimy bunch of goo. My grandson loves playing with that stupid slime stuff. Oh, that's nasty. You ever pick that up and feel it? Well, that's kind of what they end up with. They end up with this sticky goo. But it's not DNA. Even though it's got the right chemicals, maybe even in the right mixture. But it doesn't ever turn into any kind of a creature. Doesn't ever move, doesn't ever reproduce. It's just goop. So science can't duplicate the very first, most primary part of what evolution says started. The primordial ooze. Yeah, there was this goop. And then maybe lightning struck it or something happened and it turned into DNA and it was alive. Sounds like a Frankenstein movie. Yeah. They can't do it. They tried in a laboratory to create DNA and make it come alive, and they can't do it. Their theory falls down from the very beginning because they cannot duplicate what they say is supposed to be true. They can't make it happen. The argument falls apart. Now, enough about science. What about the Bible? Does the Bible talk about dinosaurs? You ever stopped and thought about that? Does it? The book of Job, chapter 40, starting at verse 15. This is God speaking to Job and his three friends. Look at Behemoth, which I made along with you, and which feeds on grass like an ox. What strength it has in its loins, what power in the muscles of its belly. Its tail sways like a cedar tree. The sinews of its thighs are close knit. Its bones are like tubes of bronze, its limbs like rods of iron. It ranks first among the works of God, yet its maker can approach it with his sword. The hills bring it their produce, and all the wild animals play nearby. Under the lotus plants it lies, hidden among the reeds in the marsh. The lotuses conceal it in their shadow. The poplars by the stream surround it. A raging river does not alarm it. It is secure. Though the Jordan should surge against its mouth, can anyone capture it by the eyes, or trap it and pierce its nose? Now, those characteristics: feeds on grass, tail like a cedar, bones like bronze tubes, not threatening to other animals nearby, lives among lotus plants that are found in swamps. Now, if I were to paint that picture and give it to a scientist, and that description would come out, you know what he'd tell me? Oh, that sounds like a brontosaurus. That sounds like a brontosaurus. Because when they have found fossils of brontosaurus, they have found them in areas that usually were marshy. The belief being that the animal needed the water to help support the mass of its huge body. The thing was almost 100 feet long. It was big. I mean, just look at this. This church is something like, I think we said 65 feet long, from the front to the back. Wow! Man, that's a big lizard. How much did it weigh? Yeah, probably about 20,000 tons. Really? Yeah. And they find them in former swampy areas because apparently they needed the water to help support their body. That's interesting. God described an animal to Job. And the animal sounds like a herbivore. It's not threatening to other animals, so it's not a carnivore. Doesn't have big, nasty, sharp teeth. Not a scary animal at all. It's like an ox. Really? Okay, but there's another one. He goes on in the next chapter, chapter 41, starting in verse 1. He describes another animal. Ready? Chapter 41, starting in verse 1. I'm going to be skipping partway through, so stay with me. Verse 1. Can you pull in Leviathan with a fishhook, or tie down its tongue with a rope? Can you put a cord through its nose, or pierce its jaw with a hook? I'll jump down to verse 12. I will not fail to speak of Leviathan's limbs, its strength and its graceful form. Who can strip off its outer coat? Who can penetrate its double coat of armor? Pay attention. Who dares open the doors of its mouth, ringed about with fearsome teeth? Its back has rows of shields, tightly sealed together. Each one is so close to the other that no air can pass between them. They are joined fast to one another. They cling together and cannot be parted. Its snorting throws out flashes of light. Its eyes are like the rays of dawn. Flames stream from its mouth. Sparks of fire shoot out. Smoke pours from its nostrils as from a boiling pot over burning reeds. Its breath sets coals ablaze, and flames dart from its mouth. Strength resides in its neck. Dismay goes before it. The folds of its flesh are tightly joined. They are firm and immovable. Its chest is as hard as rock, hard as a lower millstone. When it rises up, the mighty are terrified. They retreat before it thrashes. The sword that reaches it has no effect, nor does the spear or the dart or the javelin. Iron it treats like straw, and bronze like rotten wood. Arrows do not make it flee. Sling stones are like chaff to it. A club seems to it but a piece of straw. It laughs at the rattling of the lance. Its undersides are jagged potsherds, leaving a trail in the mud like a threshing sledge. It makes the depths churn like a boiling cauldron, and stirs up the sea like a pot of ointment. It leaves a glistening wake behind it. One would think the deep had white hair. Nothing on earth is its equal, a creature without fear. It looks down on all that are haughty. It is king over all that are proud. What kind of animal might that be? It's in the Bible. Sounds like a dragon to me. What do you think? And remember this, God, when he speaks these words, is using the present tense, not the past tense. You remember there used to be an animal called Leviathan? It's extinct now, but you've heard of it, right? No, that's not what he says. He says, look at Behemoth. In other words, Job should be able to go down to the swamp and see one down there. He is saying this to him in the present tense as if Job would have first-hand knowledge of what God's talking about. And the dragon? Now, well, see, here's where we got a problem. Science poo-poos the idea that there ever was such a thing as a dragon. Fire coming out of his nostrils. It snorts smoke. Yeah, sure, that can happen. How? Explain that to me. We're going to get to that next week. Oh, yeah, this is all fully plausible. It's not fantasy. It's not far-fetched. It's not science fiction. It's fact. There are creatures on the earth in this day and age that can kind of shoot fire out their backsides. Yeah, if you ever let off a stinker, make sure there's no lit candle anywhere nearby, right? You know about that. Well, it's not exactly that way. But there are principles that we know of that back this up. Now, both of these passages, they talk about this thing as if it's alive in this day and age. And that book was written probably at least 6,000 years ago. What's that time? Get in over there. Yeah, it's supposed to have disappeared, in Job's day. Well, the book of Job might have been written before the books of Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. They might predate that. They might date clear back to a time of maybe Noah. Yeah. Job is considered the oldest book in the Bible. So yeah, maybe there were some things walking around the earth that seemed to be kind of like dinosaurs. I mean, a dragon, a dinosaur, T-Rex. Well, there's a lot of description there that matches up. Sounds pretty much like this big, scary creature. We don't know. But even to this day, there are these legends and rumors, and there have been expeditions launched to try and find. Now, it's not Loch Ness. This one is in the Congo, in the hot, humid jungles and swamps of the Congo. They have had natives report seeing an animal, and the animal likes swampy lands. It likes the water. It's big. It's got this long neck. They've even found footprints. Now, these footprints are about the size of an elephant footprint, but an elephant footprint doesn't really have visible toes. This animal does. This animal has very distinct toes, and they're big. The guy, I've seen a picture of his foot next to it, and that footprint, that's around about size 15 or 16. It's a big footprint, about the size of an elephant. And they swear that this animal is bigger than an elephant, has a long neck, long tail. They have a name for it. They call it Mokele Mbembe. And there have been about 12 expeditions launched to try and find that animal. Now, so far, nobody has been successful. Maybe it doesn't exist, or maybe it's just really hard to find because it hides under the reeds under the lotus plants. Because you remember it mentioned the lotus plants? You know where lotus plants grow. Lotus plants are usually on a lily pad. And the swamp. It hides under the lily pads. And think about it. If it only had to just put a little bit of its head up above the water, how much of it would you see? You'd see something about the size of a large ball, or part of a large ball, that could very quickly just disappear under the water again. Okay, that could be the reason it's so hard to find. But the point of this is, scientists want you to believe that they know it all. They want you to believe that they've got it down. They know it all. That's what science means. We know this, we know that. And it's just not true. I can't stand that thought, that they think they know it all when they refuse to admit that there might be somebody who really does know it all. God, our Creator. Oh no, they don't want to acknowledge Him. But He has revealed Himself. That's the beauty of it. God is not hiding from science. No. It's just telling science, quit trying to put me under a microscope. Quit trying to put me on a scale and weigh how much do I weigh. Quit trying to measure me. I'm not physical. But I have left you all the evidence you need to get to know me. And the most amazing thing about God that He has revealed to this world is the fact that He loves this world. He has revealed so much to this world. You see, the wisdom of this world is kind of foolish, but the wisdom of God is amazing. And to have the wisdom of God, well, you need to read the Bible. Read the Bible and you find out there's a lot of wisdom in there that I can live by. There's a lot of truth in there that, man, it's still true today, thousands of years after it was written. We can't really find mistakes in the Bible. I've tried. I once thought I found a couple of them years ago when I was about 17 or 18 years old. I thought I finally found a mistake. Ha! Look here. It says Jesus fed 5,000, but over here it says He only fed 4,000. Ha ha! Oh, turned out it was two totally different instances. Yeah. Whoops. The Bible speaks, and the Bible reveals God's love for us. That's the beauty of it. That expression Jesus put into words in John chapter 15. John chapter 15, starting at verse 12. My command is this: love each other as I have loved you. For greater love has no one than this, to lay down one's life for one's friends. And you are my friends if you do what I command. So the question is, are you Jesus' friend? If you follow His commands, you are. So are you obeying His commands? Simple as that. To be in the love of God is to accept Jesus and to understand that He is the sacrifice that God created because of His great love for us. That's who Jesus is. That's what He became. The Lamb of God that takes away the sin of the world. And every Lord's Day, when we celebrate our communion service, we are celebrating the sacrifice that Jesus made to set us free from the power of sin and death.